Hey guys, welcome back. Last time we talked, it was about the partition, the death of Gandhi, and the role of Kashmir. In the interim, we looked at the rise of Pakistan, its development through the 19 from the 1970s through the early 2000s, and then the ensuing conflict between India and Pakistan over Kashmir, but other areas, conflict over other areas as well. But now we're going to jump back to India and look at India's position in the world, its kind of its stance as a global power. All right, so right now India is led by this man, Narendra Modi. He grew up in the small town, a rural town of Vadnagar, and he grew up poor. So his life early on was not one of luxury. So he was very much so used to this, the impoverished life of many millions of fellow Indians. And he has dedicated his life to politics, in particular the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP. And while some would praise Modi's rise to political prominence and rise in power from his low beginnings or small beginnings in Vadnagar, under Modi, the BJP has really stood even more firmly for Hindu nationalism, and that's a big problem. It's problematic for the future of India because Hindu nationalism is often virulently against other groups. Right? They're for the promotion, obviously the nationalism part of it, they're for the promotion of Hindu rights, Hindu power, Hindu authority. One of those examples is we see in when he was a minister in a province of India, there was violence in Gujarat, right? And he did not step in and did not execute the full weight of his power in order to stop that violence. And that violence was, many believed, not from Modi, but many believed was dictated by Hindu nationalist feelings. And that even got him for a while, for a time being, or for a time, banned from the United States. He was elected, now moving forward, he was elected as Prime Minister in India in 2014, and the rise of the BJP to the office of the Prime Minister really symbolized a push by many Indian citizens for radical change in their economy, to seek a modernization that is addressing the immense poverty, the immense structural and fundamental failings of India's economy up until that point. And under Modi, variety of things, but in particular in the more recent period, India has seen a revival of a U.S. relationship, especially during the presidency of Donald Trump, and that's due to a deep personal connection between the two men. But India is not. It's not just about Modi. We see that even before Modi, India was having a massive population boom, and that's probably some of the things. Not probably. That is one of the things that is driving the problems in India and really around the world as well. It's this sharp rise, not sharp, this rise in population that the world simply cannot handle. All right, so we see as of 2030, India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous nation. All right, so I know this one's a little older in terms of its data, but this one right here it's more recent. It's from the United Nations, and we see on the graph on the left, it's just comparative population growth. right? You're seeing India in this yellow on the left-hand side, this sharp rise, and during this sharp rise, they're expected to take care of this population, and it's just they're not simply just not able to handle it, right? All that their resources are being stretched thin. They don't have the infrastructure to deal with. As of now, we're in 2020. This population is actually even a little higher, so we see that they have a population of 1.35 billion people, so that their resources are already stretched thin. But the other fundamental shift that we see in the population is that over the last 50 years, we've seen a shift from a majority rural population, see here in the beginning of the graph in 1970, to a majority urban population. All right, so it's well, not at this point yet, but we see that that shift is dramatic, and it's been coming over the last 50 years, and it's only expected to get worse. All right, so we're to the point where we'll see these urban systems that are already being strained by its population growth are going to become even more desperate for resources. All right, I would encourage you guys to pause the video on these slides, this slide and the following slide, to kind of get a better picture, because I'm not going to go through every single part of this, but it's important to think that India's problems are not just tied to one thing. It is systematic. It is widespread, right? Whether we're looking at simple infrastructure of the roads, the bridges, they're going to have problems with that. They're going to have issues with providing clean drinking water. They already have problems with clean drinking water. Pollution is already a major issue. All right, so we're going to see these problems become even more impactful as India's population balloons to well over 1.5 billion people. All right, and this one's very similar in terms of the main ideas, but we look at more so at the economic side of it. It's just that the growth of India has not just been isolated to one area. It's become a global power, right? So you look at, they are becoming the largest, at this point, the 9th largest economy in the world. They are importing and exporting to a wide variety of countries, Hong Kong, China, the US, Saudi Arabia, all these industries that we've seen a growth in India over the last few decades are really driving the global economy. And it's also part of the problem is driving that strain on the country. So some of the terms that we want to kind of get to having right out, so you guys understand the basics to this, is that when we look at India, there are two basic periods in India's economy. In the early part, immediately after independence, India had this, what they called the permit Raj, right? It's a controlled market. So on the right-hand side of your screen, this column. So it was a lot of government control. It wouldn't go so far as saying socialism or communism, but it was very heavily government controlled, where we see a lot of high tariffs that were protecting native industries. But the problem is that it's incredibly inefficient. It's inherently wasteful in terms of its allocation of resources and its use of resources. And part of the problem is that given that it's government controlled, right, and there are these protections on growing industries, that the industries aren't pushed to innovate, aren't pushed to grow. All right, they can become satisfied with simply the markets they are in, rather than having to compete and survive against other competition, or against other companies, sorry. Right? But they eventually do move away from that, and we see that once they move towards this more free market philosophy of economics, we see that they begin embracing more of this free trade idea, where they are that profit driven, that the incentives to develop, grow, expand are much greater. But the problem being is that they also create a massive wealth inequality, or a massive wealth differential and inequality, between large portions of the population in India. So it isn't each economic philosophy has its own trade-offs. So like I was saying before, that after independence, we see that India is trying to develop rapidly. They have this permit Raj where the government's controlling a lot of it. They're planning a lot of the economic growth, but that it doesn't allow for innovation. It doesn't allow for competition to push growth and development. And yes, a country with the size of India is going to expand and going to grow, but it's not going to grow at the rate, and it's not going to expand to its potential. And we really see that over the decades, from that, just about 50 or just about 40 years, that they had this kind of economy, is that they, comparative to other nations, they did not see the economic growth that the other nations did, like China in particular. And one of the things I want to point out here at the very bottom is that we see that the lack of per capita GDP growth, so the gross domestic product that is broken down per person in India, was much smaller a percentage growth than other nations. Right? And as a clear marker of prosperity, that's a huge problem for India. The fact that they are not seeing that growth. And the embrace really from the early 90s of free market capitalism is this idea that they're deregulating. Right? It is not so much the government, not less permit Raj, more privatization that allows for companies to come in, both native and foreign companies, to come in and drive industry, to drive the economy. And we see these foreign investments increase greatly, and that's where they're able to push these companies and push the Indian economy to grow and develop. One of the things we see here on this map, I know, again, I would encourage you to pause it, but FDI, so foreign direct investment, with the embrace of the free market economy, or free market capitalism, in India in the early 90s, that we see a significant rise in the amount of foreign investment in India. Right? And that's a key marker in how the global economy is impacted by India, by the power of India. So the fact that all this money is flowing into India, and to a certain extent is flowing out, is an important signal of India's power in the global economy. So this is the, and I was talking about how early on that per capita GDP growth. So this is post. This is the free market capitalism period, and we see that it's a sharp rise, still very small for a developed nation, but the rise is precipitous over 8 years, right? Almost increases by over 1,000. So that's an important connection to this embrace of free market capitalism. All right, I'll talk to you guys later, and we'll get into looking at the impact of India and its problems with economic development.